Before we hop into today's conversation with one of the best coaches in the sport of running, I want to tell you a quick note that today's podcast is brought to you by Final Surge. And over the next couple of weeks, we will be documenting and chronicling some of the top coaches in the country across professional, collegiate, and high school sports teams. And we're calling this Final Surge Sessions because whether you're a coach, athlete, or entire team, Final Surge is the one platform built specifically for runners. It lets coaches easily deliver workouts, track results, and analyze progress, all in one clean dashboard. It syncs seamlessly with your GPS watch, Garmin, Coros, Apple Watch, Strava, you name it. No more juggling apps to stay organized. Final Surge brings training plans, messaging, and attendance tracking, super cool, into one simple place, perfect for any high school, college, or professional team. If you're a high school or college coach listening, head to finalsurge.com/schools for discounted pricing, up to 35% off. And then for anyone else listening to this, you can get 20% off your first coaching package with code Running Effect 20, all capital Running Effect 20 at checkout. Smarter training starts with smarter tools, and Final Surge is where that begins. I hope you guys enjoy this conversation with one of the top coaches in the country.
As a leader, you have to make difficult decisions and you have to make difficult choices. And I think there are leaders that just want everybody to be happy. That's a running club. That's not a program that's trying to be successful. My job is to protect the people that want to be good and to uphold our expectation and values. And that's sometimes not always going to be fun for everyone.
That was Coach Sean Carlson today on the Running Effect podcast. If you're unfamiliar with Coach Carlson, he's been on the podcast once before, back in the day when he was the head coach of the University of Tennessee Cross Country. But now he is heading into his second season as the director of cross country and track and field at the University of Colorado. And his journey of persistence, vision, and transformation all shines through in today's conversation. We tackle so many subjects, including what it takes to perform at the highest level at the country, at the NCAA level, whether the NCAA is becoming full-time professional or not, the effects and challenges of roster limits and scholarship money, and just the ever-changing landscape of the NCAA, recruiting, the lowest common denominator, and the importance of setting high standards for your team. What you would tell a high school coach out there who wants to be successful, the qualities of his most successful athletes, the importance of winning and being upfront and honest and having hard conversations with your athletes. This one is a remarkable and incredibly in-depth conversation with one of the best coaches in our sport. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It is packed 60 minutes. That is the type of content that I walk away and I'm like, wow, this could be paid content. And so I'm releasing it to you guys for free. The easiest thing you can do to repay the work is to pass it on. I want this work to inspire and impact others. And so if my work has had that impact on you, or if this episode does, please pass it on. I'd also appreciate you giving us a 5-star review. It takes 5 seconds to do, and hitting the follow or subscribe button so you don't miss more episodes like this in the future. And without further ado, enjoy my conversation with the one and only Coach Sean Carlson. Coach Sean Carlson, welcome back to the Running Effect podcast. I have moved states. It's been 2 years, and you have moved programs. So we're both in new situations. How you doing this afternoon?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you in a different color polo this time around. And we're speaking August 18th. I think this one will come out in a week or two. I think this time of year is very much the time where programs and coaches and athletes are deciding what is the direction that we want to set for our cross country season, and what are the tools that we're going to implement to make our team be successful in November or December if we're speaking of a high school cross country team at NXN. For you and your program, what have been some of the conversations internally this past week?
Yeah, I mean, we're just in a way better spot than a year ago. A year ago, it was basically my first or second week on the job, so didn't have a lot of time to prepare them, physically and emotionally and mentally. And the roster and all of those things. So we're just in a way better spot where I think you're already in a position that the direction isn't a new one. It's a continuation, right? It's continuing to evolve. a lot of the things that, you know, you've kind of reinforced over past year, bringing the new people in. I think that, you know, that's where you see successful programs is they have consistency, they have tradition, they have, and it's not just tradition of winning, it's tradition of, you know, expectations, lifestyle expectations, training expectations. And so, you know, a lot of what we're doing right now is a continuation of basically the last year and an evolution of the last year. You know, I remember last year at this time, the guys had done their first threshold workout ever. You know, they didn't really understand that concept. And so, you know, now we're a year into a lot more of that kind of stuff, or a little bit more my system, I guess, that they're used to and evolving with. So it's not like a massive, oh, ruhaha, you know, speech of we got to be really good. It's more like, hey, you know, let's continue to do what we know has helped us develop over the last year. And, you know, we're just in a lot better starting point at this point than a year ago.
Notre Dame, massive kind of history, legacy of success. Tennessee, I think, was more of like you were starting to create a history of success there, and then Colorado. I'm young, so if I'm wrong on any of this, you can tell me. But like, I feel like Colorado, when you think of the sport and you think of legacy, it's the foremost program in terms of just like rich history and legacy of alumni, both doing big things at CU, but also after their time at CU, making Olympic teams, medaling. For you, what was the call like when you heard and you found out you got the job? And with that, what responsibility did you feel like you were putting on your shoulders?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to be at programs that have been very historically successful. So Notre Dame, before I'd been there, had been on the podium at cross country nationals on the men's side. Tennessee, before I'd been there, had been on the podium at cross country nationals on the men's side, and obviously Colorado has won. Um, they're all historically successful programs. I think in each of those places that I'd been in the recent era, maybe they'd fallen a little bit more on hard times, right? My first year at Notre Dame, we were 14th in the region, which is, you know, not very good. By the time I left, we were second at nationals. When I got to Tennessee, they hadn't qualified for nationals in 20 years, which was a long time. You know, by the time we left, we were sixth at nationals. And here at Colorado, obviously, great history, both men's and women's side, multiple national titles. The last few years, in compared to maybe their standard, it hasn't been the same. And so, each of those places, it's a fun challenge, and it's fun to kind of allow the team to make it their own, and form their own identity. Um, and so when I got the call for Colorado, it's obviously a very exciting call for about 5 seconds, and then it's also like, all right, we got a lot of work to do, because, you know, looking at the roster when I first got here, I mean, I think our women were like 19th at nationals or something like that, and the highest returner on their roster was 239th at cross country nationals out of, like, you know, 250 girls or something like that. We didn't return a lot. And so I knew there was a lot of work to do on the women's side, and the men, you know, probably had one of its, the year before I got here, more unsuccessful years, I guess. And so, but they returned a lot of guys, and I think the men were in a much better place when I got here, culturally and wanting to be good, than I anticipated. And so that was really exciting, and they've taken a really good jump. The women has just been, it's been a lot of work. You know, honestly, last year was probably my most difficult year of coaching, I would say, just because the expectation of a Colorado versus where we were two very different places. And so obviously, you know, I want to get us back to the expectation of Colorado, which unfortunately you can't do in 2 weeks before the season starts. You know, it takes some time of getting the right people, getting them into a system, you know, helping create an identity and a culture. And so, you know, that's what we've been doing over the last year, and in a lot of different ways. Our men return most of our roster, and we add two transfers and then a couple pretty good freshmen that probably won't be relevant for a couple of years, because that's the new NCAA. And then the women's side, we retooled a lot. We brought back our heavy hitters, and then we just added a lot of depth and some really good personalities that I think are going to be important. It's great to have a couple good individuals, but it's really important to have a group of people that are all on the same page of their lifestyle and their expectation of performance.
You mentioned a lot of the flipping of results year over year, and I love this saying I came across, which was they called it luck until I did it again. And I think sometimes when you do something once, even you yourself can sit and you can go, well, I just had, for me, so I'll speak for myself. We got on Spotify's charts for top sports podcasts in the US. I had no clue how we got on. Like, I kind of knew, and I thought I had a formidable podcast, but I was like, oh, this has to be a fluke. Like, I have no clue how I'm on this list with ESPN shows. And then it took me, I think, over a year until I did it again. And that was one of the peak moments for myself when I saw myself on that list again. I was like, it was not luck. Like, I'm clearly doing something. I clearly have a product that is worthy of this type of recognition. So for you, can you take me through the similar process of how it's just, what's the blueprint? How do you flip programs around? Because you've done it, you're in the midst of doing it for a third time here.
Yeah, I think the thing that I've always found is, regardless of your profession, you have a system, and that's what allows you to be successful, right? And for me, we have a system of recruiting, the type of people we recruit, our honest feedback in who we are, right? Like, I'm brutally honest in recruiting. If you want to drink and party, don't come to Colorado. It's not going to be a great experience for you, because our expectations are very different, right? If you want sprinkles and sunshine thrown on you every day when you're running 7-minute pace for a tempo, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm going to be very real, and this is where you're at, and this is where we need to go. And so I think through that process, we're able to get people that maybe identify with us and fit us really well. So there's a recruiting piece, there's a training piece. As many people maybe don't recognize, there's a massive administrative piece in our sport, and then just how to figure out how to structure your program, especially in the new NCAA. This past year we've had a refine all of our systems, and refine our roster in the type of athletes that we've chosen to continue on with. And I know anytime you go to any program at the start, or you take over business at the start, right? It's very challenging because there was a previous expectation, whether that's good or bad. There's a previous culture, whether that's good or bad. And no matter what, it's going to be different. And then that's probably the hardest part, because not everybody already in the program came for maybe the reasons that aren't aligned with what you're bringing people there moving forward, right? And that's not necessarily their fault, but at the end of the day, this is Colorado. It's a Division I program. Performance does matter, and we had to change a little bit of those expectations, and I had to do that at Tennessee and at Notre Dame, and honestly, the funny thing is, of all the places that I've been, I would say Colorado and Notre Dame had the most recent success. They were the hardest places to kind of turn. Tennessee was actually probably one of the easier places with the existing athletes, because all those athletes wanted to be good. They wanted a taste of being good, and so I was kind of surprised by that, to be quite honest. But each has its own challenge, both the roster that's current, the roster that you need, and then the type of kids that come there, administration. But yeah, there's definitely a system. It's not really a question your first year doing it. There's a question of, can I get this done? After doing it a few times, it's not really a question of whether you can get it done. It's just a question of when and how long will it take to get there, providing that you have the right resources and support, because I think that's the other challenge is, listen, if you took the best coach in the NCAA, whoever that might be, and you put them at the wrong place without resources support, they're not going to be a very good coach. It's just the reality. You have to have a lot of those other pieces around you and the right people around you to make it look good. Yeah.
I've experienced this twice in my time on Instagram. When a coach leaves a program and then all of a sudden the next week is filled with graphics of transfers. Both of those times I would accredit to you. I'm curious, how are you able to have athletes so bought in that it's kind of clear athletes are, not all of them, so I won't speak on all your athletes, but quite a few clearly by their actions are going to the college for you and for your coaching, to the point where when you join a new institution, they fall alongside with you. I think that's remarkably rare. What do you think the core of that is, besides being an excellent coach?
Yeah, I think some people can find me polarizing. And so this is how I think of it is the kids that really, really want to be good and really are bought in and do everything right. I put everything into, like, I'm willing to do anything at any time for those people. And, unwavering commitment, I guess, is the best way to put it. And I think those kids recognize that. And I think the challenge that always exists is when you have someone that maybe isn't as committed, I kind of give what other people put in. And so if somebody's not maybe so invested, I'm going to put my time into the kid that is invested. And I think the really, really good people see that and want that. And maybe people that want to go through the motions a little bit more, this myself as a coach is just not a great fit, to be quite honest. I use a lot of football quotes because I love following college football and specifically SEC football. But there's tons of good Nick Saban quotes, and one of them is like, high achievers and mediocre people are like oil and water. You can't have them get along really in a competitive program, and so the people that are really high achievers that really, really want to be good, and honestly that I have to do a job more of holding back than pushing, work really, really well with me. People that probably need to be pushed as an athlete, in terms of being disciplined and wanting to be good at the sport, probably don't work as well with me. And every coach is different in that. There are some coaches that are really good at different categories. There's really good high school coaches. There's really good Division III coaches. There's really good professional coaches, and they may not always like cross over lines, right? I do really, really well with, I think, the really highly motivated athletes that my job more so is helping be a voice of reason and maybe hold them back sometimes as opposed to push them. And so when you see these transfers that might come with me to a different school, it's because they know like probably my personality and them as an athlete fit really, really well. And that's important to them. And the type of program that they're a part of is important to them, right? I'm very honest in the fact that we're going to run our program a certain way and have a certain lifestyle expectation. And so, for instance, the girl that comes to Colorado that doesn't want to drink, doesn't want to party, and wants to be a really elite distance runner and eventually go on and run pro, and she wants to get 8 hours of sleep a night, and her version of fun is going to a farmer's market. I have to protect that because that is our identity of our program. And so if there's a girl or a guy that comes here with a different set of expectations than that, I am ruining the person that wants to be good experience, right? By having somebody come back to her dorm at 3:00 in the morning drunk, right? That's not fair that I allow that in our program for the good people. And so will people be frustrated with me at times? Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm going to hold our program to an expectation to protect the people that want to be good and to protect the people that do the right things. I think it's unfair to allow people to run the program that don't want the same thing of being high achievers, and we sell that in our recruiting process. We're very honest, and so usually every place I've been, probably the biggest challenge of that is in the start, because you have people maybe that have different expectations, but down the road in each of those programs, you don't really have those issues because everybody you're recruiting, you're very honest with, and they kind of know what they're getting into. And I think that's just a really important part, is just trying to be transparent with each athlete and with your own staff. Like, people know that if they're going to work with me, that we're going to work pretty hard and we're going to work a lot of hours, and that's maybe not something that everybody wants or does, but I've never been dishonest about what that is, I guess. And so that's always the challenge anywhere new you go. When you see really successful programs, typically they're places that have had a coach in place for a long time. And that system and the expectations are kind of absolute and expected, and people know. But that was some tangent. I'm not really sure what the question was.
I don't know what the question was either, but it was an excellent thought there. And a question I have for you off of it. It sounds like you are describing the difference between a hobby and a profession and a lifestyle, whether it's the coaches or the athletes themselves. I notice this a lot. I just study high achievers across every avenue because that's what I'm fascinated by. And I think a big differentiating marker is like the best of the best view obsession as a good thing and they don't demonize it. And the ones who are purely interested never really go anywhere or do much. I came across this quote last week. I want to find it here and read it to you. It said, if you're not willing to destroy who you were to become what you obsess over, you're not obsessed, you're just interested. And I think a lot of people have this vision and they watch USA's on TV and love the thought of being at the top of the podium, but they're not necessarily willing to put in the work or put in the hours to get there. And a trend I've noticed too is the best of the best don't view sacrifices as sacrifices. I know someone's not going to be elite the second they talk about the sacrifices they have to make, because it's just like you're just going to get exhausted with yourself. I've never heard Cole Matthiessen talk once about having to run.
We talk about the sacrifices thing all the time. Like, people think that sacrifices, they mistake them for barrier to entry. Like getting hours of sleep and not drinking and partying and running 80 to 100 miles a week. Like, those are barriers to entry. They're not sacrifices. And I think you see that a lot in people not understanding, to be quite honest. And honestly, the very elite people, their level of discipline or sacrifice is very different than the normal person, right? When you get an elite female distance runner or male distance runner, their level of discipline is they have to be disciplined enough not to do too much more than, the kid that has to be disciplined enough just to do enough. But yeah, it has been surprising every place I've been. A bit of maybe the false expectation of a reality of like, oh, if I do this, I'll be good. It's like, no, you don't get it. Like, that just gives you a chance at being good. Doing all these things right gives you a chance at being good. It still doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen without other pieces. Like, I've heard some, I don't know if it's a generational thing, because I've coached a few different generations now, and even looking at my own generation, but everybody always says that problems are generational. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think it's just person to person. You can have people on your program that are entitled, and that's because of how they were raised or grew up, or they were told that they're special. I don't know that that's necessarily generational. Maybe there's more of those people in one generation than others, but in every generation, in every program, in every team, in every different school, in every different part of the country, I found people that want to be good. And I found people that are highly motivated and talented and humble. And that's what we're really looking for, to be quite honest. And you can you can filter it out. And honestly, the easiest way to filter it out is crazy parents have crazy kids.
You said a thing a few responses ago about kind of the type of athlete that would thrive at Colorado and the type of athlete, the type of athlete who comes back in their dorm 3 a.m. after being drunk. And that kind of reminded me of the science where you're not just the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, you're the average of the lowest common denominator of the people you spend the most time with. And so that's
true.
Yeah, that's where I think as a coach, if I was a coach, I would focus not just on who's the best person, but in my mind, who is the greatest risk to our culture and our ideals. How much do you focus on that? Maybe not calling it out directly, but focusing on,
that's so true. That's so true. And I think that is the really hard part of being a leader and being a coach is you're not always gonna have a group of people that are all in a line. And it does only take 1 or 2 people in your program to really bring down everything, bring down the vibes, bring down the culture, bring down, and to be quite honest, I've experienced that at different places that I've been, and it always has been, 1 or 2 people that maybe just don't align. And the thing I feel most bad about always in that situation is there are people here that want to be good and they don't want to be around that, right? And so that's as a leader, you have to make difficult decisions and you have to make difficult choices. And I think there are leaders that just want everybody to be happy. And that's a running club. That's not a program that's trying to be successful. My job is to protect the people that want to be good and to uphold our expectation and values. And that's sometimes not always going to be fun for everyone. A conversation of, hey, your lifestyle isn't fitting our program is not a fun conversation. But it's one that's necessary. And I think that is something that a lot of people in our society avoid conflict or adversity, right? And I just know that my number one job is to protect the people that want to be good and to give them an experience and an environment that's going to help them do that. And I'm just not going to sacrifice that. And so, is there going to be somebody that doesn't like me? Absolutely. I think there should be, because not everyone always is going to fit maybe a high achieving program. And that's why, also why we're trying to be very brutally honest in the recruiting process of, hey, this is who we are. This is what you can expect. And if you want something different, then, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with not wanting to have running be a really high priority in your life. There's nothing wrong with that. But we're telling you that at this program, in this system, it needs to be. And you can find a program and a system that maybe aligns better with where you prioritize it. But yeah, it's always a challenge. I think for every coach, and every coach approaches it very differently. But I think what you see is programs that are successful consistently have expectations and uphold them and have hard conversations with people. And the programs that you see that are more flashes in the pan or very, there's programs out there that don't make cross country nationals that get top 10 recruits every year, right? They get a top 10 recruiting class every single year and they're not making cross country nationals. And you got to scratch your head and say, like, why is that? And training might be a piece of that. But to be quite honest, I also think that the expectation of the program and the culture of the program is another part of it. And there's 2 different reasons for it. There's one of they're drinking and partying and just doing whatever they want. And then there's the other side where it's sunshine, rainbows, and singing Kumbaya and being a running club, right? And everybody wants to be like good, but there is adversity and there's struggle in being good, and it's just not easy. I mean, I was watching the new Netflix SEC thing that they followed the football programs and
every given Saturday or whatever.
Yeah. It was entertaining. But, obviously, I don't think a lot of distance coaches are out there screaming at kids, and I don't think that's probably necessary. But there are some similarities of SEC football it's like life or death for them, and um, for a lot of our athletes, they view it the same way. And my job is honestly to hold them back and to calm them down and to relax them and to tell them, hey, you can miss a few days because your Achilles is inflamed. It's going to be fine. But those are the kind of athletes we're trying to find, is more the ones that take it really serious, and I can pull them back as opposed to pushing them to want to be good.
You
And
mentioned
I also recognize I'm in a very fortunate position to get those kind of kids. Is Colorado, I get to filter through people. I understand that there's other programs that might have more of the opposite, and that's not necessarily because of the coach. It's just because of maybe where they're at.
Yeah, I would push back a little bit there, though, and say I think you could go to the University of Toledo, where I grew up, and you'd get some ridiculous recruits. I actually had this debate one time on a long run, like in high school, before I even knew you. And I had this debate with this kid who was being recruited to run for a school in the Big East. And I won't name names here. He's a friend, so he'll know who he is if he listens to this. But he was on the edge of going D1, but not good enough where he could ever run for Colorado. And I said, look, the nature of kids who go to NAU or Notre Dame, I think you were at the time, is like they are going for generally the coach, and they're going to be potential Olympians. And so if they believe in the coach and they see success with the coach, that coach could go to the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, and I guarantee you they'd have athletes follow. Do I think you should test that? Not necessarily, but I think it would be true. So
I think
yeah.
I think the success would all be relative, right? For that program. But actually, that brings me into kind of a cool side story. So when I was at Notre Dame, every year we would take a guy that was over 918 for 2 miles, which even at that time was not good. Okay. And I only did that because I wanted to be able to say, there was programs at the time that were, the superstars on their roster, and that's it. And this is back when there was no roster limitations. But, we went a couple of years in a row where we had a guy out of high school that would run over 918 and they would be relevant. Anthony Williams was fifth at the ACC meet in cross country. Matthew Carmody won the 5K at the ACC meet. He was 919 for 2 miles out of high school. We took a lot of those guys, and it was kind of a point for our program, a point of pride for our program of, listen, we took this guy that was not recruited by Power 5 schools, by maybe mid-majors, and we turned them into the ACC champ, or a top guy in the ACC, or a guy that qualified for nationals, an All-American. And those guys were really, really important in our program because they were a big part of the culture of our program. They were the workhorses. They were the guys that listen, you won Foot Locker and you're getting beat by this 920 guy out of high school, and it made sure everybody
Lowest common denominator
showed up. Yeah.
If
exactly.
they're pushing, it'll push everyone.
And I think that is a little bit of the sad part of the new NCAA is there's less opportunities for those guys. And I've always had a soft spot for those guys because they've helped me build every program I've been at. And I came from a program of those guys at North Central College. And so, obviously I have a really strong place in my heart for them, but now roster limitations and, all that stuff has certainly changed the landscape. And that's, it's unfortunate, but it's the reality.
A few responses ago, you took me through kind of the dichotomy of happiness and success. I want to be clear here. If you're in high school and you're a high school boy or girl, I do think you should be enjoying the sport to extents and to levels. And I think that it should not be a professional gig for you. You're not at that point. Speaking specifically in the context of college, what I always laugh at is D1 running is such a commitment that, in my opinion, like you said, if you just want to do it for fun, either go to a program where that's kind of the expectation and you kind of lace up when you want to, or go run for a club or just run by yourself. But at the D1 level, if you're going to a school like Colorado or NAU or Notre Dame or Stanford, the expectation is we're going to train and recruit like we are trying to win national championships. That is the only point. Obviously, you can give me the wish-wash of wanting to develop individuals and get them into good careers, and I'm sure that is all true, but I know the core of your heart and every other college coach I talk to, whether they're honest or not, is you guys want to win national titles because that is what you are defined
And to be
by
quite
in the
honest,
sport.
the reality is if I'm preaching a message of, hey, the skills that you learn in our sport are going to be skills you can apply to the rest of your life. Well, if we're taking last in our conference, who's listening to me? Like, people listen to you when you're winning. They become more relevant messages when you're winning. People listen to Nick Saban because he wins, and he's found out how to develop a culture of winning.
Well, that's what I was going to
People
say
don't
too.
listen to the SEC coach that got fired last year.
Yeah.
That's just the truth.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. I would love to see a social experiment where you bring in a Saban to coach NCAA cross country. And I don't think that coach would have any tolerance for certain behaviors. I don't think he'd have any tolerance for bad performances. I don't think, and that's where I think our sport does teeter on this line where running is a very political sport. It's a sport where we care about feelings a lot. And again, I think of course, feelings matter. Of course, how your well-being matters, but it's a really interesting thing where I also watched that documentary and I'm like, football is so much more cutthroat than running. And if we had the same level of expectation in running, I think half the people would drop out. I think it's just a different level of expectation of success as well as desire for that.
Your commitment and what you want should align with the program that you're in. I mean, just to be honest, if you're going to a program trying to compete for a national title, you kind of know what it's going to be, and it doesn't mean that the coach has to be mean. It just means that they're going to hold you to an expectation, right? Like, I don't have to yell, but I do have to hold people to an expectation. And I think if you want to be good, there are expectations. And don't get me wrong, there's outliers, right? There's programs that don't make cross country nationals, or maybe their training methods aren't have not evolved a lot, right? And they'll still have a good individual. That is an outlier, right? Like, that is not common in those programs. And then there's programs where it is common for them to have successful people year in and year out. I say this to recruits all the time, and I think about this all the time. If you saw an animal walking down the street, okay, and it looked like a duck, it walked like a duck, it acted like a duck, it quacked like a duck, it flew like a duck, you wouldn't look at the animal and you say, oh, that's a grizzly bear. You would probably say it's a duck. And so I say this in also the process of recruiting is, you're telling me as a recruit that you want to win nationals, that you want to be an All-American, that you want to be on a really competitive team that can compete for a podium finish. And then you tell me a school that hasn't done that. And the coach has been there for 10 years. It's not like, they're changing anything. It's like, if a coach has been there for 10 years and they're not doing those things, it's probably likely they're not going to over the next 10 years either, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that. Maybe some not in the coach's control, funding and resources and things like that. But I think you should know, you kind of know what you're walking into. Like, I've been very fortunate to have some really, really talented athletes that have made me look good as a coach, okay? But they've also helped teach me as a coach and helped me learn what it takes to win a national title. We've had an NCAA champ, a collegiate record, and an Olympian in every single distance on the track. And so to say in the recruiting process, hey, if you come to Colorado, that's a realistic conversation and a realistic thing for you. It is. When a school that hasn't qualified for cross country nationals and hasn't had an All-American in 10 years says, yeah, we're going to help you win nationals. It's like, how? Why is this different than the last 10 years? And so I think that's a big part of the recruiting process. And listen, everybody needs to start somewhere. When I first went to Notre Dame, I didn't have any All-Americans. I didn't have anything special. Um, and I had to build that. I had to go get 920 guys and develop them. When Yared Nuguse was a junior in high school, he was a 414 guy. And he ran 406 his senior year, but he basically committed as a 414 guy. And so we had to get to the point where I could recruit better and better kids over time. And I had to do that with kids that maybe weren't highly recruited. But this is what I would say to any kid, looking at colleges and all that is like, listen, if the coach is new at that program and maybe that program hasn't had success, it certainly can in the future. If the coach has been there for 10 years and the results are whatever they are, they're probably going to be similar to that for the next 10 years, whether that's good or bad. BYU is probably going to be on the podium at Cross Country Nationals. I can tell you that because that's what they've always been. And there's certain places that aren't.
Has college sports, not just football, but running now, become professional running in some senses in terms of how we train and just the landscape? And can you speak on the recent changes?
Every category, I think.
Okay.
How we train, the recruiting that takes place, the people that are in the NCAA. I mean, when I was at Notre Dame, I had, a few guys that would walk in as freshmen and be an All-American. As an American true freshman, 18, 19-year-old kid. That's so hard to do now. I mean, you have guys that are 29 years old with a half marathon PR that's faster than the American record walking into the NCAA, and they're freshmen. I think it's ridiculous to say that there hasn't become a professional level at the college side, right? I mean, even you just look at football, quarterbacks are getting paid $9 million. Like, I think it's ridiculous for us to say that that's college sports still. And I don't know what that will change to and how that will continue to evolve. But I think college sports, everything, the political spectrum, the pendulum swings in extreme ways. And you hope that it comes back to the middle, right? I think we're in an extreme wave right now. For the last 30 years, how many guys from or females from Kenya have existed in the NCAA? And I'm not saying this is a good or bad thing. I'm just saying this is a fact, okay? Probably less than 20 on any given year for the last 30 years. I mean, next year there'll be well over 150 probably in the NCAA in Division I, and that's a massive change. I'm not going to get into the debate whether that's good or bad, or it's good for the sport, bad for the sport. It exists, and it's the truth. And so it's ridiculous for us to think that things will exist as they did the last 30 years. They're changing, and they're going to continue to change. How many SEC programs outside of maybe 2 or 3 put scholarship money into distance running over the last 30 years? Probably 20% at most. All of them are going to now. They're going to have 45 scholarships. And so it just has changed drastically. The level of competition in our sport has changed. And if you don't recognize that, you're oblivious. I've recognized that even from my time at Notre Dame. It's gotten, I've had multiple top 10 teams when I was at Notre Dame. And, I think about some of those teams now, and I have to see how the NCAA unfolds, but the 8th place team is 5-10 years ago is different than the 8th place team now. It's just the truth. And I'm not just saying PRs. I'm saying level of talent on that roster. But it's going to continue to evolve where that happens. I don't know.
71.
What's that?
NAU when they play second and they scored 71 with the most. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, I did ask when I was at Notre Dame, we had 6 All-Americans. Okay, 6 guys in the top 36, 5 guys in the top 25, and we took second. Yeah. It's the game has changed. But yeah, I think every program is going to have to continue to find their identity, lean into that identity, and find creative ways. Because listen, there are certain programs in NCAA, they're going to have 45 roster spots and 45 scholarships. And they can have a very well-rounded team and be very competitive in all 3 seasons. And then there's going to be programs that have 10 scholarships and 30 roster spots. And they're not going to have a well-rounded team. That's impossible. They'll be average at everything. I would rather be really good at a few things than average at a lot. And, we will have to find our identity, and it's going to probably lean into what it's looked like over the last 30 years, but just lean in a little bit more. And there's going to be schools that can have new identities or more identities, right? There'll be some SEC schools that were only sprint focused and now have some really good distance runners because they got a guy from overseas that already runs 13:15 for 5K. There's no development. It's just boom, freshman running 13:15. That's pretty nice. And it's worth it for that program because it's an immediate impact. It's worth the scholarship to them. And there's going to be programs that have to develop more and have to take their time. And I think it's very unfair to criticize any program because at the end of the day, they're all finding the model of what works for them, whether that's international, whether that's all kids they have to develop, whatever that process is, they're doing what's best for their program and what they can do. There are certain schools that go look at 20 years ago. Did the best Americans in the country go to more than, if you look at the top 20 American distance runners, they went to the same 10 schools, and they probably still kind of are a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit more schools than that. And then there's other schools that what? If the best American isn't going to come here, then we're going to go get the best whatever somewhere else. And yeah, it's hard to blame them for that. Everybody's got their own model. Here, Colorado, we're going to be primarily American. Yeah, we're going to try and do that. But if the best girl from Colorado doesn't want to come to Colorado, you know what? We'll get somebody else and try and beat her with her.
I asked Drew Bosley this question the other day, just signed with Nike, finished his time at NAU. I said, do you think we'll ever see another NAU type team that wins, 6 and 7 years? Because I just don't see that happening again. And I've had this thought in college football. Last year's college football playoff was so exciting because there wasn't really one clear, definitive, better team. Even Oregon, who went into the college football playoff undefeated, you thought they could win a national title, but there were so many unchecked boxes. 5 years ago, it was Bama, Clemson, Georgia, and it was one of those teams that was going to win, and they looked dominant all season. For you, and I understand the reality of the sport, and you're going to move forward, but for the sake of this conversation, do you think it's a net positive, these changes, or net negative? And with that, do you think that over the next 20 years, we're going to see 20 different winners because everyone's just going to be on the same level playing field the entire time? I mean, let me put it this way. At the top level, at the top 10 programs, it's going to be more equal from the SEC program, who gets a ton of funding compared to the lower level. I understand not equal playing field at all. So I understand there's some disparity, but
is it better for the sport or not? It's hard. That's a hard question to answer. I think, has the level of the sport risen? The answer to that is yes, absolutely. I think without question. And I think anybody that would debate that is they're stuck in their own era thinking that their team from 20 years ago would win now. Is just, you're just in a fantasy world. Is it better for the sport? I don't know the answer to that. And I think we're still waiting for that to play out, to be quite honest. And I think there will have to be some sort of better rules and things in place that exist, because I don't think it's fair right now at all. I don't think it's close to fair. I mean, we're going to compete against a school that has 45 scholarships next year. We're in a different world. And so are we going to be able to do all the things that they're going to do? No. We're going to do a couple things really, really well. But so I don't know that it's fair. I don't know that it's good for the sport, but I do think that the level of our sport has risen, and I do think that is good. I think you see it already. You see kids coming out of college or in college making the Olympic team, making the World Championship team, right? Because they're competing against some of the best people in the world already in college. I mean, at any given time, I think you can make an argument that there's college teams that are better than pro groups. And the depth of college right now it's just really, really good. And don't get me wrong, there's obviously some of the individual pros are on a different level, but I think that gap between college and pro has shrunk drastically over the last couple of years. There's a lot of reasons for that. Some of it might be funny money, but NILs and different things like that. But it's hard to say for a few years still of whether it's better for our sport or not. I think we just have to wait for that to play out. And honestly, I think football controls a lot of that too. Like all the money that's entered college sports, the reality of football is eating most of it. And you just hope they don't continue eating to the point where places are eliminating programs or things like that. Time will tell. It's such a hard thing to predict that future. I do think a lot of places will find their niches as they always have. I still think you can enjoy the sport, and I still think you can be competitive in the sport in different ways, but it's definitely gone harder. I mean, how many guys in the last year, or women in the last year, have come into the NCAA with a faster, with their PR coming into the NCAA that would go into the top 10 NCAA all time? That never existed for the last 30 years. It does now every single year with multiple people.
When I had Josh Kerr on the podcast, he made this really insightful point, which was he fears the future where there won't be a place in the sport for a kid like him, where he was a walk-on to New Mexico and he was just good enough to scrap by. And basically he was describing the sport where you have to train like you're in college and high school to make it to college. And then in college, you have to train like you're pro to make it to pro. And by the time you get there, you're so burnt out and there's no room for logical progression. How do you view that?
Yeah. There's some truth to that for sure. I still think there's going to be schools and programs that develop people, right? And maybe those people leave that program and go to a bigger program after 2 years or whatever. I still think there'll be a developmental process at every place. Are those opportunities maybe more rare? For sure. I mean, when I was at Notre Dame, I had 37 distance guys on our roster. That's insane. That's more roster spots than I have currently for our entire track roster. Those are just distance runners. Yeah, I think there definitely will be less opportunity. Will it still exist? Sure, it will, but it will be harder. Yeah. I hear this question from high schoolers all the time. It's the question of, yeah, but I'm not training that hard, so I'm going to get better. It's like, yeah, it's all relative. Everybody says Nico Young was really, really good in high school. He was trained really, really hard. Yeah, guess what? He came in the top. His freshman year fall, he was top 10 at cross country nationals. And you want to know why Notre Dame lost the national title? It's because Nico Young came in to NAU and was top 10 at cross country nationals. Like, yeah, you have to train hard to be good. But when you're that good, it's like, okay, maybe is your progression as like much of a curve? Maybe it's not, but you're starting at a way higher point. And so to say, I'm a 11-minute girl or a 9:30 guy, and I'm not really training that hard though, so I'm going to get a lot better. It's like, maybe. But one, you got a long ways to go. Two, you've got to handle the training that it takes to get to that level. It's like, maybe. And so, yeah, do you have to probably train harder in high school and in college and so on and so forth? Yeah, probably you do. Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that training's evolved a lot just in the last 5 years, to be quite honest. Are people training harder? Is it harder or smarter? I don't know. Maybe, that's, yeah, but it's definitely changed. You don't see a lot of guys or girls coming out of high school running 20 miles a week and they're, winning Foot Locker. It just doesn't exist a whole lot. And if they are, as exciting as that might be, of like, oh, what is their potential? It's also kind of scary because like, can they run more to get better? So it's not always necessarily true. There's some outliers to that.
As we start to wrap up this conversation, I want to ask you a question about the level below you, high school. We've talked about excellence, winning, the importance of expectation. How would you frame that to a high school coach listening, of which we'll have many, like coaches who want to win and want to succeed, but are aware that the level of high school, it's just it's a different ball game, right? You've got kids who can join, no cuts.
Yeah. I mean, even at my level, having fun is important. Like if they're not having fun, it's hard to be successful. And so at every level that exists, I think the type of kids that I get have maybe a bit different view of fun, right? They view getting hours of sleep as fun and doing hard long run as fun, and their version of fun might be a little bit different. But at the high school level, I think if you provide the fundamentals of our sport, of developing them aerobically, having them be consistent, having them run year round, like you're going to go a long way with that. And then you provide an environment with good numbers. Yeah, I mean, there's schools that cross country running is cooler than football, and you know what? Those are the schools that are pretty successful at it. Like there's a reason that NIWATs of the world are good, and one, they usually have a very large roster that helps, but there's a culture around that program of having fun, and enjoying the sport and enjoying that process and making friends. It's not as different as you would think at this level. And the good teams I've had all have that part. Are they a little bit more serious? Sure. Are they, is their version of fun a little bit different? Yes, sure. But they come to practice and they enjoy it every day, and they enjoy the process of getting better. And I think on any level, in any sport that exists, there are maybe some exceptions to that, I guess. If you just have a roster of 6 guys that run 13:10 that just came off the pro circuit and just joined college, I guess maybe you can bypass that a little bit. But I do think that's something that we're going to have, because we probably won't get 6 guys coming out of somewhere that run 13:10. I hope we do. That'd be nice, but it's
Life's not fair. Life's not fair. What I always said, and I'd be curious to get your take on this, grew up in Holland, Ohio, I took online classes, and so my option was to run for the public school, so I didn't really get to choose the school I got to run for. In the history of the school, only one kid had qualified for the state meet. And I came in as a kid who read Steve Magnus's Science of Running in 8th grade. I mean, I was obsessed with running long before the podcast. That's why the podcast started. For me, I would come home and I would rant to my parents, who could care less about running. They cared about supporting me in my dreams, but they didn't care about running. And I would be borderline screaming and saying, these kids want to screw around in the woods with sticks and play hide and go seek, and they think that's fun, mom and dad. But championships and making state meets and winning league titles and running fast and knowing what you're capable of, that is what actually is fun. And that's a hill I think I'll die on, where in high school, some of the things that high schoolers think are fun are low levels of fun. It's the things that are meaningful and hard to get that are actually remarkably fun. They're just really hard to get, and it's such a process, and it requires your whole self, that they separate. Because it's hard, it can't be fun. And in my mind, and maybe this is just very male-brained, primal, but I'm like, no. If it's hard and you do it with other guys and you work together, that's really fun. Like going all out in a track workout with a teammate or a brother is just about as much fun as I've ever had doing anything in life. Yeah. Any thoughts on that? Yeah.
Winning is fun. Winning comes at a cost. It's that's a very true statement. At least I view it as that. And I think when you go through adversity and struggle, it doesn't come easy. It makes it more enjoyable. I think when things are handed to you, it doesn't have the same meaning. And you see that sometimes from high school to college. The superstar out of high school that it was easy and they were good, and then they go to college and there's adversity and um, they don't enjoy that, you know. And then there's the opposite of the kid that's just kind of grinded. Like I've always liked kids that um, have had a challenge of where they've gotten to, and you know I appreciate that. I appreciate that level of humbleness and lack of entitlement. I think those are really, really valuable qualities to be successful in this sport, because this sport, regardless of who you are, it's challenging and it's going to have some hard times along the way. And the people that are resilient and can deal with adversity are usually the most successful ones. But the other part I always tell our guys too is like, you know, we can do everything right. You know, we can train right and test our lactate and do all these things perfectly. You still have to have the dog in you to be good. And that's something that just some people got and some people don't. Um, and that's very hard to filter out.
I don't know how much of an issue this is in college sports. I'm sure you hear more rumblings of it than me. The one I think downside to speaking about winning and, you know, how important it is and all of that is that some kids can think then it's winning at all costs. How do you make that distinction to your athletes of, look, we want to win, but never cut corners to get to that place?
Yeah, I think it's more of like, you know, we're trying to turn every stone over. You know, we're trying to go into that race, the championship race, with a clean conscience, knowing we did everything we could. We did everything right, we did everything we could, and we can be happy with that outcome. I think you get frustrated is when you didn't do the right things or everything that you could, and you don't have the outcome you want. It's like, well, you know, we're not cutting quarters, we're not cheating, we're not doing things like that, because that doesn't make you feel good either. But I mean, at the end of the day, every team I've had, I think if we've done the things the right way, regardless of the result, I'm proud of that team. And usually when we do things the right way, the result kind of happens. But you know, like there's been in years that we've kind of not maybe had that result. That's usually early on in your program. You know, early on in my time at Notre Dame, you know, we started being 14th in the region, which is, you know, just not good. And it took a little bit longer than I wanted it to take for us to be good. We went from 14th in the region to 14th in the country in like, it was like 2 or 3 years. And, you know, that year in between, that second year, we were doing everything right, but we still weren't getting the result, right? And so I was still proud of that team. It just hadn't evolved yet into what it was going to be. And so results do tell a lot. They don't tell everything all the time. But yeah, it doesn't have to be win at all costs, but it does have to be turn over every stone and do things right, so we can go into that race with a clean conscience and feeling confident.
Final serious question for you. What's the one takeaway message that coaches should be implementing into their teams this cross country season?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think on the front end, it's their ability to recruit the right people. I can't tell you how important that is. Obviously, from a talent standpoint, sure, but from a cultural standpoint and type of person standpoint, when you have a few of the wrong people in your program, it is very challenging. It's very challenging to be good. And then in the moment, I just think it's continuing to reinforce the values that, you know, you guys have. And your values need to be clear and expected and upheld. I think you can't say time matters to us and being on time is really important, and then your best kid in your team shows up late to practice every day. It's like, it doesn't matter to you. And I think you have to kind of uphold what you're preaching and your values on a daily basis, because then it becomes easier to buy into all the other things. And sometimes you're going to be the bad guy for upholding, you know, your expectations in the program.
You know ball, so we'll end on that note. Who's winning the chip? Are my Buckeyes bringing it back to Columbus again? Are we taking Clemson, Texas, Archie at the helm
For the title?
for the title?
I have to look at the budgets. I have to look at how much people spent. I know Texas Tech spent a lot of money, so I assume they'll be in it. Oregon spent a lot of money, so they'll be in it. Like, that's the sad part of some of college athletics now. It's not who's the best coach, who spent the most money. And that definitely exists in football, college football, 100%. I don't know that any head football coach is teaching drills anymore. They're negotiating with agents, and I hope that doesn't infiltrate our sport too much. But I do think there is a little bit of that. So who's going to win? Whoever spent the most money and has a culture. That's who's going to win. I'm not sure who that's going to be yet.
On the running side, cross country, final question. Your entire career of coaching, you pick 5 dudes. Who's on that roster?
For a cross country team or
cross country team? In no particular order.
Dylan Jacobs, Danny Kilray, Yared Nuguse. Those 3 for sure. They're all very good runners. And hopefully we're saying at the peak of their career. No, they were like climbing the ladder, I guess. The last 2 are more difficult because there's so many guys that we've had that are very similar in how good they became. But the hard part is there's different pieces that they bring culturally to each of those groups, right? Each of those teams. And like, sometimes it's not as simple as just the 5 best PRs. It's the 5 guys that meshed the best at that time. And that changes year to year too. Like we've had, like Andrew Alexander's and Jake Renfrees and Matthew Carmondy's and Kevin Salvano's and Anthony Williams on different teams at different times. And they were good for those teams because of who they were in that team. They may not be good for a different team. And so, man, the last 2 are really hard ones to pick. I don't know that I can't do my guys dirty. I pick all of them. I love them all very, very deeply. And I'm very lucky that I had some guys that were really loyal, that and girls, to be honest, that were really, really loyal and bought into the system and weren't entitled, that came and worked for it every single day. And I think those are really good teams. Those are really good guys, really good girls. But
so Yared, Dylan, and Danny are going home happy, knowing that they were
there's a lot of other guys that I kind of mentioned there that were big pieces of us changing who we were at Notre Dame. And I've had really, really good guys too that were big pieces of us not having a good team. And I experienced some of that at Tennessee. So yeah, you see both sides. Yeah.
Coach, thank you for your time. I always feel wiser after our conversations, and I always know they're going to provide value to anyone who listens. So appreciate the time. Go Buffs, and excited to see what you'll do in year 2.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.